So now you're over 40. You spent the last 20 years focusing on your career, you focused on your family, but you've neglected your health. And that's left you wondering, how do you focus now on your own needs? What's the best path for you over 40? It's not going to get you injured, it's not going to overwhelm you with too many things, and it's going to get you a result which you've been struggling to achieve on your own. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Beast of Burden. My name's Paul Bassett. I run Hells of Health here in Wandsworth, London. I'm a personal trainer and fitness entrepreneur, helping people get fit and healthy and take charge of that area of their life that they, well, perhaps have never attended to. And today, this is something quite close to my heart. If you're over 40, like me, I'm 46, maybe you've been struggling to get that health journey started. You're a bit confused about what to do, how to approach it, and you've tried a million things to try and solve some of those health goals that you have, a bit confused about what to do. Well, you know, being fit over 40 is never linear. That's the one thing I can say right from the start. Today, I'm recording this, I've got a cold. I've done some really long hours this week working on my business. That's one of the downsides of running your own business. You do spend long hours. And despite having very lofty fitness goals, I have to balance that with a very busy life. And you're probably the same as me. I mean, you might have kids. I've got two. I've got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, both boys. And you have a career. Now, the career may be in the, you know, you maybe have got a really nice level now where you're just coasting, everything feels good, or you're still trying to drive and you know, work your way through a company, grow your business, improve yourself in terms of education. But what I've noticed over the years, just from my own experience, and it really reflects everyone I work with, is, well, responsibilities only grow year on year as you start to get into your 40s. There are certain things that get easier and there's certain things that get harder. Now, I've got young kids, you know, as I said, 7 and 10. Some of my friends in their 40s have kids now in their teens to late teens, and some have even left home. But you may be somewhere along those kind of, you know, if you have kids, they may still be at home with you, and that's an added responsibility. What I also know is that many of the clients we work with, their careers are at the kind of pinnacle. You know, they've worked 20 odd years, you know, developing their career, developing their expertise, improving their visibility within their industry, and that's come with extra responsibilities. And, you know, having spent 20 years at desks, they're now starting to pay the price of maybe very low movement. You know, that sedentary job has kind of had an effect on their cardiovascular fitness, their waistline. And what I wanted to talk about really is like, well, how do you train over 40? What do you do? Both men and women, similar principles, I would say. Now, women have additional things such as menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause. You know, postmenopause is less common, I suppose, in your early 40s up to 50. But, you know, some people are going through early menopause, so it can be very relevant. But certainly it's something that women are thinking about as they hit their 40s. And for men, sometimes testosterone is something that's maybe a miss. Certainly many years of injuries, things like that. A lot of guys come to me with injuries that are kind of just nagging them. So when you're 40, is there a different approach? Well, of course there is. Let's take things and break things down bit by bit. Everyone I work with has the same core challenges. They're traveling more, they have very long hours, they have a lot of pressure on their shoulders coming from family, work, financial, emotional. They've maybe got older parents that they're looking after. Their kids are developing and they have needs. They have social lives. They also have built over many years, I suppose, emotional and physical crutches that allow them to deal with that pressure. And all of which has got them to a point where they suddenly realize their health isn't quite where they want it. Some people it's really bad, and some people it's just on that cusp of getting bad, and if they don't do something about it, they're going to really notice. There are a few people we work with who've managed to maintain a good level of fitness in their 40s, And of course, there are people who we don't work with who've got it nailed, and we don't typically work with them because they're solving the problem. But we're here to solve problems, and that means we've got to create an approach that fits the people we're working with. A lot of people, let's talk about where people usually approach their fitness and how they try and solve it on their own. What they typically try and do is, well, they remember that they used to be fit. And what happens is a kind of gradual slide, isn't there? There's a gradual slide from, like, you're in your 20s, you're going out, you feel attractive, you feel slim, you're eating basically what you want, you fit the clothes, you don't really have to think about it. You do the occasional class with your mates, you push yourself, you wake up the next day, get on with your week. Yeah, big nights out, go and train the following day, everything's fine. And then there's just this gradual creep. And usually there's an interruption. Interruption is either marriage or kids or big promotion at work or, you know, an injury or something like that. And then there's a shift, and it's imperceptible at first, but there's suddenly a gap that widens between that person who didn't really have any issues, who was kind of leveraging their youth, to suddenly being the person in their 40s who's quite distanced from that person. And it's a creep that happens. It's like being slowly boiled. You know, you don't really notice until it happens, or until it's too late. And what happens is you go, right, what worked for me when I was 28? Right, I'll do that. And then you typically break, or you suddenly realize it's unsustainable. So I see commonly that people suddenly realize they've got to sort something out fast. And so what they do is they choose a method of solving the problem quickly. They're time-poor people who are highly stressed, who are highly driven, who have success in one area of their life and don't have success in their health. They just want to sort that problem quickly. And so they'll do something like fasting, they'll go keto, they'll do some kind of crazy exercise routine, they'll sign up for an Ironman, they'll sign up for some kind of high rocks where they've got to do it within 6 weeks, and they'll push the timeline and try and achieve it. And it works until it doesn't work. And what happens is they give up, or that there's something that gets in the way and health gets put on the back burner once again. Or there's an injury, and it changes the whole way they have to approach things. So the reality is when you're over 40, you have to be more structured. You have to be more involved in a process. You can't just use intensity to overcome the problem. There's enough intensity in your own life. There's enough intensity bringing up kids. There's enough intensity when you're managing teams. There's enough intensity when having a couple of drinks in the evening means you pay for it for 3 days. So when you're over 40, you have to approach it differently. And often you've got to extend the timeline. I think most people need to be in some kind of calorie deficit, probably for around 18 months to 2 years, maybe even longer, in order to get them to their ideal weight. Because you can do it faster, and I've helped people do it faster, and everything's individual. But the reality is actually some of our most successful clients, you know, they have a pretty stop-start approach at the beginning, and then slowly, if they don't quit, they start solving the problem. And 18 months, 2 years later, they've lost 20, 30 kilos, body fat percentage is radically down, muscle mass is up, and they're a totally different person. And there's no way of rushing that. And it can be disheartening when it takes that long. If someone sits down with you and says, look, you know, actually, you're probably going to have to deal with this for 18 months. People are like, oh, I was hoping to be able to deal with it in 6 weeks. And I run 30-day programs, I run 6-week programs, but I don't run them as challenges. I run them as trials or foundations where we're trying to teach people the basics so that we start people creating habits and behaviors that allow them to start building momentum. The biggest thing I know I can do for anyone over 40 is maintain their attention on the problem. And I think that's the main problem that we have with people over 40. It's just their attention is being split. And it's being split on those things I've already spoken about. Kids, work, social life, travel, you name it, older parents, health issues. You know, they suddenly realize they have to have a heart checkup, or they suddenly realize they're type 2 diabetic. You know, their attention gets moved from thing to thing to thing. And when everything's urgent, you know, you end up very lost and directionless. So I have to keep their attention on the problem long enough to solve it. Everyone's got a different personality type, and there are people who do very well with very set goals that they've got to deliver in certain timelines. So, you know, things like marathons can work for very specific people. But for many people, you know, they don't want to have to deal with their health because they're overwhelmed by it. And I think most people go in with programs that are just too intense too quickly. They overwhelm themselves, they burn out, they starve themselves during the day. By the time they get to dinner, they're ravenous, they overconsume in the evenings, they have no strategy of what to eat, they have no preparation, and then the whole cycle repeats day in, day out until they get a bit of burnout, and they hope that they can overcome the burnout by exercising their way out of it. So they sign up to a program, go like crazy, and then again that burns out, and then they're left doing nothing. And what ends up happening is that they just get comfortable where they're at. They see fitness as a struggle. They don't identify as a fit person. It no longer becomes who they are, and they just lose interest. And that cycle just happens. You know, over time, the pain gets bad enough, and all of a sudden they focus on it again, and then they can have that boom bust approach, and that just happens every couple of years until they just lose interest altogether. How many 70-year-old people do you know that are fit? I mean, let's be honest. How many of your parents' generation do you look at and go, wow, they lift weights, they look strong, they look vibrant, they're full of energy, they're walking miles. There are no doubt there's a lot of people who out there in the world, there's going to be some people like that, but the majority aren't. You know, majority of my mum's generation don't do any exercise other than maybe walking to the shops. So you've got to attend to it now, because you're not going to attend to it in your retirement. But, I mean, look, my kids are, as I said, like one of them's 10. He's been doing athletics 3 years. He's still a beginner at 3 years. Of course he is. Most adults do not give themselves 3 years to solve a problem. There is such a rush to get it done that they feel disappointed right from the start. They don't see progress quickly. So you've got to set a different timeline, and you've got to take into account the things going to interrupt it. As I speak, I've got a stinking cold, and it's annoying me because I'd rather not have to deal with it. I managed to train yesterday. I think tomorrow I'm going to be training probably at a lower level. There's just no way I can push myself. I probably could, but I will pay for it. And I'm always having to think, like, how hard can I train? Because I know what I've got to do the following day. I know what time I've got to be up. I know what my kids need doing. I know the responsibilities I have. And I know I can't just sleep in and muck about doing nothing until I recover from whatever. It's one of the reasons I don't really drink much anymore. I certainly don't drink at home. And it's not a big part of my social life because I just cannot function. I cannot do the things I like if I drink. And it's not that I drink a lot. It's just that my body just isn't used to it. I don't feel good. I don't sleep well. Certainly sleep is something. I mean, my sleep was awful last night because of the cold. And my son walked in the middle of the night and he's wriggling around in bed, and that meant a pretty bad night's sleep. And so if I get up and then pretend I'm going to exercise my way out of the problem, it's not going to happen. So when you're 40, you have to take into account the things that are most likely going to kill you, like heart disease, metabolic problems, injuries are going to prevent you from exercising. You've got to look at the other obstacles in your life, and you've got to come up with a plan that's going to address those things. And you've got to make it easy. Don't overwhelm yourself. Work on a couple of different habits and behaviors that are going to give you the biggest return on investment. Now, when personal trainers say move more, I personally think moving more is great as long as you're moving well, particularly if you've got injuries. Having some kind of education around movement for however long is useful. I'm just working with a lady at the moment. She's only over from a different country. She's only here for a few weeks, but she wanted to learn how to do some movement. So I've taught her. She's going to go home and she'll be able to take that back to where she lives. And she's going to hopefully get more out of her own movement because she's had that education. I'm actually just at the moment sorting out some rollerblading lessons for myself because I've taught myself how to do it, but now I need a little bit more support, and it's going to teach me how to do it without injuring myself. And I'll get more enjoyment out of it. So I think when you're 40, one of the benefits of being 40 is that hopefully you get to a point where maybe you're earning a little bit more, you can spend a bit more money on yourself, particularly when the kids aren't as young, maybe the kids have left home. I worked with a guy who was spending 60 or 70 pounds a night on very expensive wine because that was just what he liked, but he didn't want to spend money on his personal training. That's fair enough. I'm sure the alcohol probably had an effect on that, but you've got to invest in your health, because you get to 60 and you've not invested in your health, you're going to be investing in some kind of solution to a health problem. I mean, I don't want to be a 60-year-old man whining about how I feel when I could have solved it when I was 40, you know? If I was still moaning about my knee health now, 46, that I had when I was 28, that was my fault. You know, I've got to solve that problem. It's not going to go away on its own. It's only going to get worse. So my advice to anyone who's over 40 is just seek a little bit of help. Find someone who can help you make a lean program where you don't overwhelm yourself with too many things to do. Give yourself enough time to learn those basics and implement them over and over and over again until they become second nature. You know, if you're in sales, there's a reason people try and rehearse sales scripts. There's a reason why musicians rehearse. I used to work with musicians. I used to be one, not professional, but I used to play in bands, and we would play a song like 50 times before we took it to play it on stage, because we wanted to rehearse it till it became automatic. And it's the same with these skills around fitness. They're much more simple than some songs, you know. It's not complex to manage a diary, but it does take persistence. So I know it's a bit of a rambling one, that. What I want you to take away from this is take a look at the things you want to achieve. Start thinking about what's an essential part of achieving that. And then work out whether you need help to achieve that competency in those areas. And if you do, find the person who's going to help you, whether it's an online coach, whether it's someone who's a mentor who can help you. You know, there are great business coaches that you might already be working with that can help you with your time management. But don't pretend that you can solve this problem just by pure effort. Use strategy. You now have more wisdom, you're over 40. Use strategy and you'll be able to solve this problem quickly and with the least amount of pain. Because you can do it. People make fundamental shifts in their health. Give yourself enough time to do it, and give yourself a bit of time to learn. My video that I did a couple of weeks back on how I stayed fit for 17 years is a good case in point. It takes time to achieve a result. You've got to play, you've got to have a bit of strategy, you've got to make mistakes, and you can't overwhelm yourself with too many things. Please like and subscribe to this podcast. The more people we can reach, the better. And if you're looking for training in London, Wandsworth, then I'd love to hear from you.